Hello, my name is Precious Jade. Behind me is the record of when my great-great-grandmother Sarah arrived with 4 children in the 1870s. Her daughter Lucy, my great-grandmother, went on to marry William, and that's where things take a turn. William was a Chinaman, and that's how you end up with someone who has 5 generations in this country and looks like me. My story is similar to Penny Wong's. I identify as a banana, yellow on the outside, white on the inside. I don't speak any other languages other than English, and I grew up with an appreciation of Chinese culture, Chinese food, Chinese traditions, but I don't identify as Chinese. During the Olympics in Sydney, people would walk up to me when I was walking around with my 2 children and my husband, who happens to be an Anglo, and would welcome me to this country. They would walk up, shake my hand, and welcome me to Sydney, the city that I have lived in all my life. A Chinese woman greeted me at a railway station in Cantonese, and one of the few words I recognised, I nodded respectfully. Then she proceeded to launch into a long conversation, which I understood nothing of. And I tried to explain to her that I only spoke English, no Chinese. And she got very upset that I didn't understand what she was saying. And then she pointed to my eyes and goes, "What about this?" And I'm like, yeah, I know. That's part of the problem, right? It doesn't come with bilingual capability. Wish that it did. It would make my life a lot easier. Transport's always a bit of a problem for me. As a public servant, I went to Canberra and a woman came up and grabbed me by the arm at the airport and said, "Jalpak," to which I said, "Sorry?" And she said, "Jalpak" again with enthusiasm and tugged on my arm, trying to head me off to a bus. And then she said, "We're going to the War Memorial. We're going to Parliament House. We're going to see the gardens. It's going to be a wonderful day." And I looked at her and went, I'm going to Parliament House too, but I work there. And then she realised I wasn't a tourist, so she let go of me. At the Gold Coast Airport, I had a transport pass that had credit on it, but I wanted to find out how to get a refund. So I asked the old white man at the counter what I should do about that, to which he responded, "Well, love, why don't you give it to one of your friends when you go back to China?" And I thought, looked at my husband and said, "Why didn't I think of that?" At Taronga Zoo, we saw a possum run across the roof. My 6-year-old son and I were just standing there when the zoo guide came up and explained to us in painstakingly slow, broken English, "There is a possum up in the ceiling. It's running across the roof." And my son looked at me, and then he looked at her, and then he looked at the possum, and then he looked back at me and said, "Hey, Mum, what's she trying to do?" And I said, "Well, darling, I think she's trying to explain that there's a possum in the ceiling, but I don't think she speaks very good English." And we left and got on with our day. Racism is one of those things that genuinely shocks me because my perspective is so white. I'm taken aback when someone confronts me with racial microaggressions or overt aggression, which has happened in occasions. It's been assumed at functions when I'm out that I'm the waitress, even if I'm not wearing black and white. I have been complimented about my excellent non-accented English. I was at Yum Cha and had taken business colleagues to Yum Cha, and one of the men seated near me said, "Wow, look at this place. Look at all the Chinese people here. It must be really authentic. You know what? We're the only white people in here." To which I said, "Not so fast, Guelo. That's on you." And then we had a situation where I was in a shopping centre and buying meat for dinner, just like normal people do, and a track-suited old white woman wandered up to me and started abusing me. It was during the pandemic, You brought the pandemic here. It's your fault. Why don't you go back to where you came from? Which, if she bothered to ask, was actually First Floor St Margaret's Hospital in Darlinghurst, but I don't think she was interested in facts. Similarly, an old, angry white man made a beeline for me. I was sitting in the children's playground area, minding 4 kids. 2 are blind, 2 were blonde, clearly not mine, one of which was my baby, who was unable to sit up at the time. She was so young. I saw this man heading towards me with his wife trotting along behind him, and I strapped her into her pram, clipped her into a seatbelt, and pushed her out of harm's way. I waited till he got there. I didn't make any eye contact. I knew it wasn't going to be good. When he got there, all I could see was his feet, and then the tirade started. You people, you come here, you buy up everything, you take over everything. And then the wife got in on the act. She said, why don't you go back to where you came from? A la Pauline Hanson. So I said nothing. And then once they finished the tirade, I stood up. I got nose to nose with this man and this far away from his face. And then I said, hey, mate, why don't you give me your address and I'll make sure the whole street's brought up around you. Even better, maybe the whole suburb. Then his jaw fell on the ground and I said, how dare you speak to me like that? Do you only pick on women with small children? Is it your mark of a hero to attack a woman with a baby? Where do you get off speaking to me like that? For your information, mate, I was born here. My father is a war veteran. He has an Order of Australia. How dare you speak to me like that? As for you and your missus, why don't you piss off back to where you came from? They look rather shocked. I promise they will never do that again. But what was disappointing is that no one stood up to help me. It was a crowded area and not one person stood up to stop the abuse. That was disappointing. I live in that rare sector where sexism meets racism, because this face means that a racial stereotype applies, that I should fulfill every man's Asian woman fantasy as well. So I got propositioned more than my fair share when I was younger. It was so bad that a senior business contractor who was on site at my employer had the audacity to proposition me at a business lunch in front of my colleagues. He thought it was okay to ask me to share a room with him over lunch. My colleagues were offended, as was I. He was subsequently fired. I'm also used to being less valued as the daughter of Chinese parents. Ultimately disinherited, my gender has denied me educational opportunity and financial opportunity. It was all afforded to those with Y chromosomes. If I had a Y chromosome, my life would be completely different. A barrister told me when he was handling my case that I was not his only disadvantaged Chinese princess. It still goes on, and it's really disappointing in the 21st century. I chose to participate in this program because I wanted you to hear the reality of being biracial. I did not choose this. It came with the deal. I asked for broader understanding in Australia. Ursula Jovic, the Indigenous actor, said, my difference is not to blame for your ignorance or hatred. When is it enough? When will it be enough for my family and people who look like me to be considered Australian? My family boasts a couple of Orders of Australia, a university professor, 2 scholarships, a monk, 2 nuns, a surgeon, a lawyer. When is it enough? When will it be acceptable for this base to be considered Australian? Do I have to do this? Do I have to do this? I mean, really, what does it take for me to be considered Australian? Tell you what, Australia, how about you give us a fair go? That'd be really great. Thanks.